Assalamu alaikum, brothers. Today we will be having our classes today. Inshallah will be the last day for the Kitab al-Fitan and Tajweed workshop and Book of Wisdoms after Asr. So all the brothers in the lobby and downstairs, we'll be starting in a few minutes. Just an announcement about the keys again for the cars in the welder's lot. If you could please hand those over to us right now, or before, after the dars. We can move them before Asr, and they'll be available for you, when you're going to be leaving either today or tomorrow.
على آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم. Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. We're going to get started. So today I just have one hadith, but it's very long. So again, I'm going to skip the Arabic in the interest of time, and then we'll go through the English translation. And a lot of it refers to things that we discussed before. So for most of it, I won't go into too much detail. There's just one aspect of the hadith that I'd like to touch upon. So after going through the hadith, we'll just touch on that one aspect, and then inshallah we'll be done. Okay. Nawas ibn Sab'an radiyallahu anhu reported that Allah's Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam made a mention of Dajjal one day in the morning. He sallallahu alayhi wasallam sometimes described him, not really describing him to be a big deal. And sometimes he described his turmoil as very significant, such that we felt as if he were in a cluster of date palms. Basically, sometimes the Prophet ﷺ discussed Dajjal to such an extent, people got so scared that they were looking around thinking that he might be hiding in the bushes next to them. When we went to him, the Holy Prophet ﷺ, in the evening, and he read the signs of fear in our faces, he said, ﷺ, "What is the matter with you?" We said, "Allah's Messenger, you made a mention of Dajjal in the morning, sometimes describing him to be insignificant, and sometimes very important, until we began to think as if he were present in some near part of the cluster of date palm trees." Thereupon he ﷺ said, "I harbor fear in regard to you and so many other things beside Dajjal. If he comes forth while I am among you, I shall contend with him on your behalf." This is something that we mentioned in one of the previous days. "But if he comes forth while I am not amongst you, a man must contend on his own behalf. And Allah Ta'ala would take care of every Muslim on my behalf and safeguard him against his evil. Dajjal would be a young man with twisted, contracted hair and a blind eye. I compare him to Abdul Uzza bin Qattan." He was a person at the time. "He who amongst you would survive to see him should recite over him the opening verses of Surah Kahf." This is Surah 18. It's written in Roman numerals over here. We discussed before the connection between Surah Kahf and Dajjal. "He would appear on the way between Syria and Iraq and would spread mischief right and left. O servant of Allah, adhere to the path of truth." We said, "Allah's Messenger, how long would he stay on the earth?" He said, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, "For 40 days. One day like a year, one day like a month, and one day like a week. And the rest of the days would be like regular days." We said, "Allah's Messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, would one day's prayer suffice for the prayers of a day equal to 1 year?" Thereupon he, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, said, "No, but you must make an estimate of time and then observe prayer according to that estimate." We said, "Allah's Messenger, how quickly would he walk upon the earth?" Thereupon he, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, said, like a cloud driven by the wind. Basically, he'll travel very fast. He would come to the people and invite them to a wrong religion, and they would affirm their faith in him and respond to him. He would then give command to the sky, and there would be rainfall upon the earth, and it would grow crops. Is everyone following along? It's a lot of reading. I'm not speaking, I'm just reading. "Then in the evening, their pasturing animals would come to them with their humps very high and their udders full of milk, and their flanks stretched." Okay, so what's going on over here? So some people respond to Dajjal. They respond to his false teachings. And then, as a result, Dajjal grants them prosperity. Their animals that they have begin to grow really big and fat, and they begin to prosper financially and materially speaking. He would then come to another people and invite them, but they would reject him, and he would go away from them, and there would be drought for them, and nothing would be left with them in the form of wealth. So the people that reject the message of Dajjal, it doesn't seem to turn out well for them. It doesn't seem to turn out well for them. They end up in hard times. He would then walk through the wasteland and say to it, "Bring forth your treasures." And the treasures would come out and collect themselves before him like the swarm of bees. He would then call a person brimming with youth and strike him with a sword and cut him in 2 pieces and make these pieces lie at a distance which is generally between the archer and his target. He would then call upon that young man and he will come forward laughing with his face gleaming. So which young man was this? The same one that was cut in half. So basically this is another miracle that he's going to perform. He's going to cut somebody in half and then put him back together. And that person will come back as if nothing happened. He will come forward with laughing, with his face gleaming with happiness. And it would be at this very time that Allah Ta'ala would send Isa alayhi salam, the son of Maryam. And he will descend at the white minaret in the eastern side of Damascus, wearing 2 garments lightly dyed with saffron and placing his hands on the wings of 2 angels. He would then lower his head. There would fall beads of perspiration from his head. And when he would raise it up, beads like pearls would scatter from it. Every non-believer who would smell the odor of himself would die, and his breath would reach us as far as he would be able to see. He would then search for Dajjal until he would catch hold of him at the gate of Lud, and would kill him. Then a people whom Allah Ta'ala had protected would come back to Isa alayhi salam, the son of Maryam, and he would wipe their faces, and would inform them of their ranks in paradise. And it would be under such conditions that Allah Ta'ala would reveal to Isa alayhi salam these words: I have brought forth from amongst my servants such people against whom none would be able to fight. You take these people, meaning your followers, take them safely to Tur, the Mount of Tur. And then Allah Ta'ala would send Gog and Magog, in other words, Ya'juj and Ma'juj, and they would swarm down from every slope. So I apologize, this is a lot of reading. The first of them would pass by the lake of Tiberias and drink out of it. And when the last of them would pass, he would say that there is once water there, meaning that they would consume all the water of the lake. Jesus and his companions would then be besieged here at Tur, and they would be so much hard-pressed that the head of an ox would be dearer to them than 100 dinars. Basically, there'll be a shortage of food. And we know that when there's a shortage, then what happens? Prices go up. Would be more to them than 100 dinars. And Allah's apostle, Isa, Jesus, and his companions would supplicate to Allah Ta'ala, who would send to them insects, which would attack their necks. The necks of who? Ya'juj and Ma'juj. And in the morning, they would perish like one single person. Basically, they all die at the same time. Allah's apostle, Jesus, and his companions would then come down to earth, and they would not find in the earth as much space as a single span which is not filled with their putrefaction and stench. Allah Ta'ala's apostle, Jesus, Isa alayhi salam, and his companions would then again beseech Allah, who would then send birds, whose necks would be like that of Bactrian camels, and they would carry them and throw them where God would will. So basically, these birds are going to remove all the carcasses of Ya'juj and Ma'juj. Then Allah Ta'ala would send rain, which no house of clay or the tent of camel's hairs, basically no house, would be able to keep out. It would wash away the earth until it appears like a mirror. Basically, everything will be clean. First, the earth was polluted with the carcasses of Ya'juj and Ma'juj, and then it'll rain, and then eventually everything will be clean. Then the earth would be told to bring forth its fruit and restore its blessing. And as a result thereof, they would grow such a big pomegranate that a group of people would be able to eat that and seek shelter under its skin. Basically, they'll be able to sit under the peel of the pomegranate. And the cow would give so much milk that a whole party would be able to drink it. And the camel would give, milch camel, don't know what that is. The milch camel would give such a large quantity of milk that the whole tribe would be able to drink out of that. And the sheep would give so much milk that the whole family would be able to drink out of that. And at that time, Allah Ta'ala would send a pleasant wind which would soothe people even under their armpits and would take the life of every Muslim. And only the wicked would survive, who would commit adultery like donkeys, and the last hour would come to them. Okay. So, wow, that's a lot. Hopefully everyone digested that. Should I read it again? Just joking. Okay. So a lot of the concepts we discussed before. We discussed Dajjal, so no need to go into further detail. We discussed Isa alayhi salam, that was yesterday's discussion, so I'm not going to go into further detail on that. But one part of this that we haven't discussed is Ya'juj and Ma'juj. Okay, so I'm not going to recount the events that are mentioned in the hadith because I just read it. If you want to read it again, then please, you can take the slides from me and read it again or look at the translation. But we'll just take a few minutes to discuss Ya'juj and Ma'juj, and hopefully we'll finish early today. Okay, so first of all, Ya'juj and Ma'juj. There's sort of a dominant narrative that people have in their minds about who Ya'juj and Ma'juj are, and this is what I grew up with as well. Until later on I found out that that probably wasn't so accurate. So what do we know about Ya'juj and Ma'juj? They're isolated. Okay, what else? They're trapped. Okay, kind of the same thing. What else? Yeah, Surah Al-Kahf talks about it. Very good, mashallah. So I had pictured them, when I was growing up, I pictured them to be like gremlins. And like these, and then there's actually these sort of false narrations that circulate about them that say all these crazy things, like they have pointy ears, and some narrations say that one ear is so big that they sleep on it, and the other ear they cover themselves up at night with. So there's all these sort of weird narrations that circulate. And due to that, it's sort of like created a distorted image in people's minds. People think that they're sort of some subhuman species, or like gremlins or goblins or something of the sort. So in reality, Ya'juj and Ma'juj, they're normal people. Okay, they're not like any like monsters or anything like that. They're people. However, they're barbaric, and they're very murderous. And so they're basically just like sort of barbaric people. And being barbaric doesn't necessarily mean that they're not civilized by today's standards. Doesn't mean that they're running around in loincloths holding spears and things like that. There can be a civilized nation by today's standards that are still very murderous. They still go around committing genocide and killing people left and right. They don't have to be uncivilized. So this image that we have in our minds of Ya'juj and Ma'juj being like these crazy, wild people, that are sometimes we even think them to be subhuman. It doesn't necessarily it's not really supported by textual evidence. Okay, that's something to keep in mind. Now, the dominant narrative, okay, so this is going to be a bit technical, probably something that many of us haven't heard of before. When I first heard this, it was hard for me to grasp too, because this was, what I'm about to tell you, at least for me when I first heard it, was sort of against everything that I had up till that point heard on the topic. Okay. So what do we know about the Ya'juj and Ma'juj? We know that their story is recounted in Surah Kahf. There was a king named Dhul Qarnayn. And Dhul Qarnayn, this is at the beginning of the 16th juz. He travels around, and then he comes to people. They're living in a mountainous region. And then there's a people that he encounters that tells him that there are these tribes, Ya'juj and Ma'juj, and they're constantly making trouble for us. They're constantly harassing us, so please help us. So Dhul Qarnayn constructs a wall. And then he constructs a wall that separates these, I guess, the quote-unquote good guys from Ya'juj and Ma'juj. And they were able to live in relative peace after that. Is everyone familiar with that story up till now? Okay, so that's what's in the Quran. Hopefully everyone knows it. We read this surah every Friday, hopefully. Okay, so that part is in the Quran. Now, when Dhul Qarnayn builds this wall, he says, قَالَ هَذَا رَحْمَةٌ مِّن رَبِّي. This is mercy from Allah, mercy from my Lord that I was able to build such a thing. فَإِذَا جَاءَ وَعْدُ رَبِّي جَعَلَهُ دَكَّا وَكَانَ وَعْدُ رَبِّي حَقًّا. But however, when the promise of my Lord comes, then He'll level the wall. And the promise of my Lord is definitely true. So is everyone familiar with this part up till now? Hopefully, most of us? Okay. So that's what the Quran says. But now we have this narrative in our mind that, I don't know, many of us grew up with or we heard from here and there, and then we tend to try to fit this narrative onto what the Quran says. But it doesn't always fit so well. So now the perception that many of us have in our minds is that Ya'juj and Ma'juj are trapped behind a wall that Dhul Qarnayn built, and they'll remain trapped until right before the Day of Judgment, and then they're going to somehow escape, and then they're going to wreak havoc on the world. Right? Does this sound familiar? Kind of what everyone thinks. I had thought this too for a long time. But, okay, so there's a couple of things to keep in mind. First of all, we've scanned the globe with satellite so many times. Have we ever come across, we as in like people in general, have we ever come across like, I don't know, a nation, a very, very populous nation that's trapped behind a wall? Sorry? China. Well, they're not really trapped, are they? Yeah. Okay, so not really, right? And is there like any current like sort of people today that like a large populous nation that's sort of imprisoned and they're not able to escape and they've been trying to escape for centuries but yet they can't get out? Do we know of this in our study of geography or, I don't know, world cultures? Not really, right? So now if we try, so does that mean that they're sort of like some subhuman species and they have the power of invisibility and they're just hidden? I don't know, that's kind of far-fetched. So, I don't know. So it seems that if we just think about it a little bit, it's hard to reconcile it with what we know today of geography or just general knowledge. So now somebody could say, well, these are from the akhbar of ghaib. We don't really know too much about it. We don't understand the way that it's going to happen. So it'll just happen in whatever way Allah Ta'ala wants. So that's fair. That's totally fine. But the ulama have tried to reconcile like the story of Ya'juj and Ma'juj along with what we know from historical narrations and just history, geography, things like that. And they've come to some conclusions. So that's what I'll share with you today. This is more educational. It's not really inspirational, so apologize. Okay. So now, first of all, there's a couple of considerations. One is, okay, before I get to that, Allah Ta'ala says that right there in, okay, no, actually this is in Surah Anbiya. So in Surah Kahf, Allah Ta'ala says that Dhul Qarnayn said that he built the wall and then the wall is going to stay up until the command of my Lord comes, until the promise of my Lord comes, and then my Lord is going to level the wall. And then in Surah Anbiya, Allah Ta'ala says, حَتَّى إِذَا فُتِحَتْ يَأْجُوجُ وَمَأْجُوجُ, when Ya'juj and Ma'juj are released. Right? So we naturally connect the two things and we say that the wall is going to be leveled and Ya'juj and Ma'juj are going to be released. And then they're going to wreak havoc on the world, as we just saw in the hadith that we just read. But there's a couple of considerations to keep in mind. One is that, so this is the explanation of many ulama, most prominent amongst them being Allama Anwar Shah Kashmiri. He says that, well, the Quran says, حَتَّى إِذَا فُتِحَتْ يَأْجُوجُ وَمَأْجُوجُ, when Ya'juj and Ma'juj will be released. It doesn't say that when the wall will be opened. Futiha literally means opened. It doesn't say when the wall will be opened. It says when Ya'juj and Ma'juj will be opened or released. And this is an expression in Arabic. You can use futiha for even like a swarm of locusts that comes. When any swarm or large group of people, they suddenly emerge, then the word futiha is used in Arabic to refer to that. So when Ya'juj, so then they say that it's saying that when Ya'juj and Ma'juj are released. It doesn't necessarily say when the wall will be leveled, when the wall will be open. So if you think about it, you can sort of reconcile it with the fact that we don't really see any wall today. For the most part, we don't really see any wall. So then it's possible, Allama Anwar Shah Kashmiri further writes, that it's very possible that the wall crumbled maybe perhaps centuries ago, and the wall no longer exists today. And then Ya'juj and Ma'juj, they have assimilated back into greater society. Because after all, they're people, they're not really like gremlins or anything. So they've assimilated back into normal society, yet when Qiyamah comes near, what they'll do is they'll sort of band together and they'll start wreaking havoc on people. Sorry, it seems kind of like strange, but this is what many ulama have mentioned. Yeah. So what the explanation of many ulama, the alternative explanation is that the wall doesn't necessarily exist today. Rather, it crumbled perhaps centuries ago, perhaps even more than that. And Ya'juj and Ma'juj, they weren't trapped behind the wall after it crumbled. So they sort of, where did they go? They just assimilated back into normal society. They're people just like me and you. But now what'll happen? So the Quran, the Hadith and the Quran also indicates that they'll wreak havoc on the world. So they don't need to be trapped and then released in order to wreak havoc. Rather, all they really need to do is just start a movement, just band together. It's not necessary that they need to be trapped before that. Does that make sense? Okay, so that's something to keep in mind. There are a few things that I wanted to mention before I get into the slides. Well, just a second. Okay, so now the question is, what about Dhul Qarnayn? What did he say? He said, حَتَّى إِذَا جَاءَ وَعْدُ رَبِّي جَعَلَهُ دَكَّةً. When the promise of my Lord comes, then he'll level the wall. So didn't he say that? Okay, but again, we have to sort of approach it with an open mind. We don't necessarily, it wouldn't be fair to fit our sort of preconceived understanding on the Quran. Do you think Dhul Qarnayn, did he have knowledge of all the events to happen before Qiyamah? Not necessarily. I mean, we don't know that. Is it possible that Dhul Qarnayn built a wall and then he said that, well, it'll last for as long as Allah Ta'ala wants it to last, and someday, just like Allah Ta'ala will, everything on this world will come to an end, someday this wall will come to an end too. Is there any mention in the Quran that Dhul Qarnayn says before Qiyamah the wall will crumble and Ya'juj and Ma'juj will be released? There's nothing like that. Okay, so that's something to keep in mind. That Dhul Qarnayn mentioning that the wall will one day crumble, it can just mean that, well, I did whatever I could that was in my power. I built a wall, but I'm not going to live forever, and the wall won't last forever too. One day, Allah Ta'ala will bring this wall to an end. And it's not necessary that the wall comes to an end the day before Ya'juj and Ma'juj are released. Right? The Quran doesn't mention anything like that, nor does Hadith. Okay, so that's another thing to keep in mind. Okay, one second. Okay, the Quran also just says that, just building on this point I just mentioned, the Quran says that the wall will last till some time. It doesn't say the wall will last until the point that Ya'juj and Ma'juj are released. Does that make sense? That the wall will last, but it won't necessarily, it doesn't say that it'll last right until the point that they're released. There's something that I just mentioned too briefly. Okay, one or two more things. Okay, okay. So now that's something to keep in mind. Now, so Allama Anwar Shah Kashmiri further explains that Ya'juj and Ma'juj are maybe perhaps not just one group of people, but perhaps they could be a group of many tribes. And then Dhul Qarnayn, he definitely entrapped one of their tribes, or some of their tribes at least, but it doesn't say anything about him trapping all of the tribes. And we know that at some point the wall came to an end, if we go with this explanation, which is that of many prominent ulama, in Mufassirin, Sharihin of Hadith. We know at some point the wall came to an end. Now, just a second. Yeah, so now Ya'juj and Ma'juj will come and they'll wreak havoc on people at different times throughout history. And then right before Qiyamah, they're going to wreak havoc in the way that was mentioned in Hadith, that no one will be able to defend themselves against them. But we know that they're people that tend to be violent, that tend to be mischievous. So then it's very possible that if there are many different people, a large group of people, that throughout history, they'll appear in different instances, them or their progeny, or their progeny's progeny, and then they'll cause mischief. Right? So that's what Allama Anwar Shah Kashmiri says. Okay, so that might be a lot to digest, so I'll let that sit for a minute, and then we'll go on to something that's slightly different. Okay, the first thing that is up here on this slide, okay, we'll discuss Dhul Qarnayn, and then I'll revisit this explanation in a couple of minutes. Okay, so the first thing is that who is Dhul Qarnayn? Dhul Qarnayn literally means, what does Qarn mean in Arabic? Anyone know? Qarn means horn. So Dhul Qarnayn means that the one who has two horns. So some people, they take this literally, they say that he must have been a man with two horns. But most ulama say that that doesn't really make sense because people don't really have horns. So they say that the horns are not literal, but rather they're metaphorical. So horns can mean, many of the ulama mentioned that horns can mean two braids, right? So somebody has two braids, kind of like two things sticking out of their head, horns, right? So that's one explanation that they mentioned. I have it up here, it's the first point. Another explanation ulama give is that horns mean the horn of the east and the horn of the west. We know that Dhul Qarnayn was a king who had power over a vast region of land. So he had power over the east and the west. So then hence you get the two horns. That's another explanation. A very similar explanation is that he had power over the Arab people and the non-Arab people, the Ajam. Right? That's kind of similar to the second explanation. And Sufis. Okay, the ulama of Tasawwuf always have their own explanations for things. They look at it in a different light. So they said that he had two horns. That means horns of inner knowledge, knowledge of batin, and a horn of outer knowledge, knowledge of zahir, external knowledge, esoteric knowledge and external knowledge. So Sufis say that knowledge of internal, the inner and the outer. And that's just an explanation that they give. Now, who was Dhul Qarnayn? A lot of people, maybe you can say a common misunderstanding is that Dhul Qarnayn was Alexander the Great. Has anyone heard this before? Yeah. Okay, so does anyone see any problems with this? Okay, Alexander the Great, was he Muslim? No, he wasn't Muslim. He was a polytheist. What else? That's perhaps the biggest one. Anything else? What do you say? No, he was before, I think. So, okay, so Alexander the Great, that's what most people say, but it doesn't really seem to be accurate because we know pretty well from history that he wasn't Muslim. Okay, now the next question is, so people have alternative explanations. Some people say he was this king, some people say he was that king. But the fact of the matter is that أَبْهِمُوا مَا أَبْهَمَهُ اللَّهُ. Allah Ta'ala didn't mention him specifically, saying exactly who he was, exactly when he lived. So that means that explanation that any commentator or alim might offer is simply an attempt at explaining it. We can't definitively pinpoint who he was. Okay, is that fair? Now the next question is, where is this wall? Some people say the wall is in Central Asia, near Bukhara and Samarkand. That's one explanation. Another one is that the wall is in Dagestan. Dagestan is in near Chechnya. It's like in, I guess you can say, a little bit west of Russia, like Western Russia. And another group of people say that the wall is in the Caucasus region, between the Caspian Sea and the Black Sea. Okay, these are some explanations that are mentioned. Okay. And then an alternative explanation that some scholars really strongly uphold and other scholars vehemently deny is that the wall is the Great Wall of China. Thank you. Okay, so then personally, my Shaykh al-Hadith, Mufti Rida al-Haq, he vehemently denies it. He said that's not possible, it can't be the Great Wall of China. But other great scholars actually very strongly uphold this. So I wanted to just share the view of one scholar with you. Okay, before I do that, let me just finish this. Okay, a few other considerations. Now, if we say that the wall isn't, it's not physically there anymore. The wall perhaps crumbled years ago, perhaps centuries ago. Then now there's certain hadith that say that the wall has been opened. There is a hadith that's narrated in many of the books of hadith, in which Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam woke up. He said, وَيْلُ لِلْعَرَبِ مِنْ شَرٍّ قَدْ اقْتَرَبَ. That woe be to the Arabs, there's an evil that's drawn near. قَدْ فُتِحَ الْيَوْمَ مِنْ رَدْمِ يَأْجُوجَ وَمَأْجُوجَ. That a hole has been opened up in the wall of Ya'juj and Ma'juj. So that's what the hadith says. So now the ulama that say that the wall no longer stands today, they end up now they have to explain this hadith. So how do you think we might explain this hadith if we uphold the interpretation that the wall no longer stands? The Prophet ﷺ is saying that now there's a hole in the wall. Anything? Did everyone understand the question? Okay, so one dominant explanation of this whole Ya'juj and Ma'juj story is that the wall no longer stands today. Right? The wall crumbled years ago. It's not necessary that the wall last up till the point that Ya'juj and Ma'juj are released. Right? But now there's a hadith that I just mentioned in which Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam woke up and he told his wife that there's a great evil that's drawn near, there's a hole that's been opened up in the wall of Ya'juj and Ma'juj. So now if you go with the explanation that the wall no longer stands, then you're going to end up having trouble, at least initially it seems, explaining that Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said that now there's a hole. Okay, so that's one explanation, that perhaps it was just started to break down at the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That's one explanation. Anything else? Okay, that's kind of similar, that it was slowly breaking down over time. But then a lot of ulama actually mentioned something that is kind of interesting, sort of weird, I guess, to many of us, but that this whole thing is not literal, rather it's metaphorical. That when Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said that there's a hole that's been opened up in the wall of Ya'juj and Ma'juj, he means that now the fitna of Ya'juj and Ma'juj has now approached. Basically, like the evil that Ya'juj and Ma'juj are going to spread, it's getting closer. So the whole thing is not to be taken literally, but rather it's to be taken metaphorically, right? So a lot of ulama uphold this opinion. Whatever you want to believe, it's up to you, but I'm just telling you. My job is just to put everything out there. Okay, so then a lot of ulama, Mufti Ridha al-Haq, ulama Nusha Kashmiri, and many ulama say that this refers to the fitna emerging, as I wrote up here on the slide. The opening of the wall refers to the fitna emerging. And then if we go with the idea that Ya'juj and Ma'juj, they're not only going to come out all at once at the end of times, but rather throughout history they've caused mischief, them or their progeny or anyone else who's from that line of descent. Then we can say that, well, that kind of makes sense. And something that, actually I'll revisit this explanation in a couple of minutes, okay, because this is related to something that happens on the next slide. Okay, so everyone just keep this thought in your mind. Okay, so the next point I wrote, I mentioned it before. Dhul Qarnayn referring to the wall breaking down, it's not necessarily connected to the account of events before Qiyamah. And Dhul Qarnayn says, هذا رحمة من ربي فإذا جاء وعد ربي جعله دكا. When the promise of my Lord comes, He's going to level it. The wall is going to crumble. Maybe he didn't know about the events of Qiyamah. There's no evidence to indicate that. So maybe he's just saying that eventually it'll come to an end. And the release of Ya'juj and Ma'juj, I mentioned this as well, the third point that's on the slide. Release of Ya'juj and Ma'juj doesn't necessarily mean they're released from the wall. But what can it refer to? Their emergence. Emergence doesn't necessarily mean that they're locked up and then they suddenly get unlocked. What does emergence, what can it mean? That they band together. They band together and they emerge as one cohesive group. And then they start causing mischief. Okay, so that's another explanation of it. Okay, now let me tell you what Muhammad Tahir ibn Ashur. So Muhammad Tahir ibn Ashur, he has a very unique opinion on this. Anyone know who he is? Anyone from Tunisia here? No? Okay, I didn't think so. So Muhammad Tahir ibn Ashur was a scholar of, he passed away in 1979, so not too long ago, a relatively recent scholar. He is from Tunisia. And he was basically like the Qadi al-Qudat of Tunisia. He was like basically their most prominent scholar. And he wrote many, many different works. His most prominent work is a tafsir called At-Tahrir wa Tanwir. That is perhaps one of the most unique contributions to tafsir literature, especially in recent times. So Ibn Ashur has a very unique opinion on this. He says that Dhul Qarnayn was not Alexander the Great, was not some Persian king, but rather he was a Chinese emperor. And then his name was, however you pronounce this, Qin Shi Huang. So that was Dhul Qarnayn, and he lived from 259 BCE to 210 BCE. Has anyone studied world history? Probably studied a little bit of Chinese history. You know about the different dynasties, right? The Tang dynasty, Han dynasty, etc. There was also the Qin dynasty. And the Qin dynasty was like the first dynasty to they basically were just centered around one emperor because it crumbled basically after his death. So it was a relatively short-lived dynasty, but they were the first dynasty to basically unite all the disunited kingdoms in China. So they're the first dynasty to rule over a unified China. Okay, so anyone remember the Qin dynasty from world history? No? Okay, well, then you can go back and review world history, I guess. Okay, so Qin Shi Huang. So this is Dhul Qarnayn according to Alama ibn Ashur. And he was as I said, he was the first emperor of a unified China. So then hence if you take this explanation, then what would the wall be? Great Wall of China. So Alama ibn Ashur very strongly upholds this opinion that the wall must be the Great Wall of China. And he said that people have said that the wall was in the Caucasus region or by the Caspian Sea or the Black Sea or wherever, because people sort of have it in their minds that Dhul Qarnayn was Alexander the Great. So hence they wanted to try to think of some wall that was somewhere in that region. But he doesn't have to be Alexander the Great. Actually, we know that he is very probably not. So then if you take it to be this Chinese emperor, then it could be possible that the wall was the Great Wall of China. And now the question is that could the wall simply keep... Has anyone seen the Great Wall of China? Like in person? So wait, just raise your hand if you've seen it. Online? Anyone seen it in person? No? Okay, so it's not just one big wall, right? It's different walls that were built over different periods of time. And they were also guarded as well. It wasn't that just a wall would maybe keep someone out, but rather they were guards too. So if you think about it, that it would be guarded, then it would make more sense that people wouldn't be able to scale the wall. right? Yeah. Okay, very good. So now, as I said, that some scholars strongly uphold that Dhul Qarnayn was the Dhul Qarnayn was this Chinese emperor, and then the wall was the Great Wall of China. Other scholars, as I said, vehemently deny it. Amongst them, Mufti Ridha al-Haq. And he mentioned exactly the same thing in our class on Sahih al-Bukhari. He said that the Great Wall of China is not made from copper and lead, but rather it's made from stone, as far as I know. So then that would be one thing to show that that's not the wall. But then people of the second group that uphold that it's a Great Wall of China say that, well, it doesn't have to be the entire thing that's present today. There could have been some part of it throughout history that was made of metal. We don't really know. Maybe that part no longer exists today. So that's what they say. Wallahu alam. I don't know if it's the strongest explanation or not, but that's what they say. Now, these are just some explanations that Alam ibn Ashur offers, or some reasons to substantiate his view. He says that the Chinese empire has always been advanced, so it could have been, Dhul Qarnayn could have been this Chinese emperor. He said that most of their rulers were just, and they were people who were very sort of well organized their society. He said that, so this is actually like a pretty strong argument. The first two, whatever. But the third argument, I guess, is kind of good. He said that Chinese, they would tend to lengthen their hair. And they would often put their hair in braids. So the fact that this Chinese emperor had braids, and this king that's spoken about in the Quran is called Dhul Qarnayn, kind of makes sense a little bit, right? So that's one argument that he offers that makes a little bit more sense than the others. And then he said there's no greater wall in history than the Great Wall of China. Okay, so that's another thing. And then his last argument is also a little bit convincing. So the hadith that I mentioned to you before, an al-Mu'minina al-Hakam Zainab binti Jahshin radiyallahu anha. So this is a unique hadith. There's multiple wives of the Prophet ﷺ that are in the chain of narration of this hadith. And I think about 4 Sahaba or something that are in the chain of narration. So anyway, I don't have the full chain of narration here. But Zainab bint Jahsh radiyallahu anha narrates that أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم دخل عليها فزعا يقول لا إله إلا الله. So Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam once, So Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam once came in the house startled, scared. And he was saying, لا إله إلا الله ويل للعرب من شر قد اقترب. That woe be to the Arabs because a great evil has drawn near. فتح اليوم من ردم يأجوج ومأجوج مثل هذه. Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam said that today a hole has been opened up in the wall of Ya'juj and Ma'juj like this. And then he showed a hole. Okay. So now the question is, as I said, some ulama interpret this to be metaphorical. They say that it doesn't refer to an actual hole, but rather refers to the emergence of fitna. And Mufti Ridha al-Haq, the Shaykh al-Hadith, is a very prominent, very strongly pushes this opinion. That refers to fitnas, different types of fitnas of wealth and strife and things like that. But now Ibn Ashur, which opinion is he upholding? That the wall refers to Great Wall of China, and then Dhul Qarnayn was who? Yeah, so the Kin emperor. So he says that, well, in this hadith, okay, and then, so then Zainab radiallahu anha said, Ya Rasulullah, nuhlaku wa fina salihun, or you can say, anahliku wa fina salihun, will we die, will we perish when righteous people live amongst us? Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, Na'am, إذا كثر الخبث. That if there's widespread evil, then yes, even the righteous people will perish too. Okay, so again, this is a translation. Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam came to visit me one day frightened, and he said, woe to the Arabs because of an evil which has drawn near. Today an opening of this size has been made in the barrier restraining Ya'juj and Ma'juj. And he sallallahu alayhi wasallam made a circle with his thumb and index finger. I said, O Messenger of Allah, shall we perish when there are righteous people amongst us? He sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, yes, when wickedness prevails. Okay, we just said that. So now, so Alam ibn Ashur says that, well, Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam specified that this evil has drawn near the Arabs. And now if you take Dhul Qarnayn to be the Kin emperor, and the wall to be the Great Wall of China, then who do you think Ya'juj and Ma'juj would be? Which country is directly north of China? Mongolia. So then who would Ya'juj and Ma'juj be? Yeah, the Mongols, basically the Mongol Empire, Genghis Khan, and yeah, all the other emperors of the Mongol Empire. So this is something, an opinion that Allama ibn Ashur very strongly pushes, that the Mongols are Ya'juj and Ma'juj. And then hence throughout history, they've, I mean, most prominently like at that time when they basically conquered most of the known world, they wreaked havoc, and it's possible that they might come out again before Qiyamah, them or their progeny or any related people. So now what happened? The Mongols, when they struck, this was in the year 1258, Common Era, when they struck, what happened? They ransacked Baghdad. They say that there are more than, I think it's like 1,200,000 people that were killed that day. In that time when they ransacked Baghdad, they basically, the Abbasid Empire came to an end with the Mongols in the year 1258 of the Common Era. The Mongols had basically like done away with the Islamic Empire of the time. Allama Abu Hassan al-Nadwi has a book on it. It's called Saviors of Islamic Spirit. It's translated into English. And then one section of it is about the Mongols. It's called the Tartars. You can read it if you're interested. So anyway, so the Mongols came, and what did they do? They destroyed the Arabs, amongst other people, but specifically the Arabs are of interest to us. They destroyed the Arabs, and they brought the Islamic Empire to an end. So then hence Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, وَيْلُ لِلْعَرَبِ مِنْ شَرٍّ قَدْ اقْتَرَبَ, that an evil has drawn near the Arabs, that the Mongols will, I guess at some point, be released. They'll band together and then they'll wreak havoc. And that's what happened about 6 centuries later. So this is the opinion of Allama ibn Ashur. I told you the opinion of Allama Kashmiri and Mufti Ridha al-Haq. You're welcome to take whatever you want, or just stick with whatever you thought before. It's entirely up to you. I just wanted to share with you some of the various opinions that are offered regarding this issue. Okay, so then, as I said, today wasn't really an inspirational lecture. Most of them weren't, actually. It was just an educational lecture, just so that we can become better informed about the hadith that are related to Ya'juj and Ma'juj and the ayat that discuss it as well. So I think this will end a little bit early today, and this brings our series to... Okay, there's one question. I'm sorry, okay, you said Dhul Qarnayn was Muslim, and then, yeah. Okay, so this is actually the biggest problem I have with this explanation of Allama ibn Ashur, that we know Dhul Qarnayn was Muslim. And then, as far as we know, this Qin emperor, Qin Shi Huang, as far as we know, he wasn't Muslim. The dominant philosophy or way of life at that time in China was Confucianism. He might have followed that, but we don't really know. So as far as we know, he wasn't Muslim. So if someone takes that into consideration, this is one big reservation I have about accepting this, because we don't know that he was Muslim. But Allama Muhammad Tahir ibn Ashur, he says that, well, we don't know, because Allah Ta'ala says that he sent messengers to every nation. There's very possible, I mean, it's very likely that there are messengers that were sent to China as well. It's possible that maybe he was Muslim, but that historically wasn't transmitted to us. So that's what he says. Allahu A'lam, we don't really know. And then there's there's some historical narrations that this emperor, this Chinese emperor, was, at the end of his life, he became like kind of brutal. But Muhammad Tahir ibn Ashur says that we don't know about the veracity of those narrations, we're not going to accept it. So that's what he says, Allahu A'lam, that's his view. He's entitled to his view. And I mean, we're entitled to accepting it or not if we don't want to. I just wanted to share it with you. So personally, some parts of his explanation I feel are convincing, but a lot of them, it leaves many questions to be resolved as well. Yeah, exactly. Right, so if somebody was Muslim before the Prophet ﷺ, because you know all the prophets, they brought the deen of Islam, but it wasn't necessarily with the exact same practices that we uphold today. Right? The Sharia was not the same. So if they weren't like practicing Islam in the same way as us, then I mean that's what we would expect from them. Okay, so yeah. Yeah, so there's a hadith that... Yeah, so that's something else that... Yeah, so he's asking that there's a hadith that mentions that Ya'juj and Ma'juj, they far outnumber everyone else. So then, the Mongolians, it's not a very populous country. Like, how would you explain that? Right, so now ulama will mention different things. So, I don't know, that would be, if you do ta'yin, if you specify that Ya'juj and Ma'juj are the Mongolians, then basically the onus of explaining that would be on whoever upholds that explanation. Now, regarding that hadith, ulama mention many things, and they say that perhaps that can refer to just anyone who's basically prone to mischief. Anyone who's prone to, they're following in the path of Ya'juj and Ma'juj. People that are murderous, that kill, that spread mischief, things like that. So then hence the followers of Ya'juj and Ma'juj, maybe just anyone who follows their path, they outnumber regular people. That's just another explanation that's offered. So with this brings a conclusion to our series. So we'll just make a quick dua. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Allahumma lakal hamdu kulluh. اللهم لك الحمد كالذي نقول ولك الحمد خيرا مما نقول اللهم لك الحمد حتى ترضى اللهم لك الحمد إذا رضيت اللهم لك الحمد بعد رضا سبحانك لا نحصي ثناء عليك أنت كما أثنيت على نفسك سبحانك لا نحصي ثناء عليك أنت كما أثنيت على نفسك سبحانك لا نحصي ثناء عليك أنت كما أثنيت على نفسك اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم ربنا ظلمنا أنفسنا وإن لم تغفر لنا وترحمنا لنكونن من الخاسرين ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب اللهم إنا نعوذ بك من الحور بعد الكور اللهم إنا نعوذ بك من الحور بعد الكور اللهم إنا نعوذ بك من الحور بعد الكور اللهم إنا نعوذ بك من عذاب القبر ومن عذاب جهنم ومن فتنة المحيا والممات ومن شر فتنة المسيح الدجال ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم اللهم وفقنا لما تحب وترضى اللهم إنا نسألك علما نافعا ورزقا طيبا وعملا متقبلا اللهم توفنا مسلمين وألحقنا بالصالحين وصلى الله تعالى على خير خلقه محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين وإياكم. Oh yeah, so in reference to that, it's not specifically stated when it'll be, but we know that their emergence is one of the major signs before the Day of Judgment. So we know that'll be towards the end. Yeah, we know that. So then that's why many ulama mentioned that there are going to be multiple emergences of them over time. So then their final emergence will be before the Day of Judgment, but then they could have come out times before that too. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So that's why some people hold on to that explanation.
You said they outnumbered it? Yeah, they did. Yeah, because the line,
The army was
there, right? The line itself, they were just trying to get bigger.
But it doesn't say anywhere that he was.
Well,
It says that he was wise.
he was wise. It says that he was righteous, and then he's sort of getting ilham from Allah Ta'ala. And he's saying that إِمَّا أَن تُعَذِّبَ وَإِمَّا أَن تَتَّخِذَ فِيهِمْ حُسْنًا. Allah Ta'ala is communicating with him. So then we say that probably that wouldn't happen with a non-Muslim. And then he's referring to Allah Ta'ala as well. فَإِذَا جَاءَ وَعْدُ رَبِّي. So then we say that from that, yeah, so probably he was Muslim. Yeah, I mean that's what the Quran seems to imply. Oh, sure. Yeah, just send me an email.
So which one do you think will be?
That's why I said I don't have an opinion. I just tell you what other people say. I just do nothing. Yeah, I never said my opinion. My opinion is أبهموا ما أبهمه الله. Yeah, so that's what I do. So then that's why I just do nothing of what other people say. Yeah, the Quran doesn't mention these specific details because the maqsad of the Quran is to give us guidance, right? So the Quran just mentions things that are related to just whatever we can take as a lesson. The Quran leaves out when did this happen, what was his name, what did they do, what happened next. The Quran leaves out all those details. So
Take the teaching. Forget
exactly,
about the details.
exactly, yeah, yeah. Yeah, sure, inshallah, right after this.
So often, like if it's study this or this other mention, we have these events that we have.
When?
These events, some of these events, it's around the corner because so was suspecting that was being murdered or something. But then, it's also a long time, I think it's like last month, last time. So, it's like, totally something like that.
So it's a relative thing, right? Over like throughout the course of
Like in
history,
some
right?
cases, like everybody says, you know, years, 30 years, 35 years, 70 years, and the rate of size of the numbers is like that. So some of these people, they don't know.
Yeah. So basically it's all relative. The hadith mentioned that Qiyamah is pretty near to us. It's relative over like if you look at like the course of human history. If something is even like let's say 2,000 years or something like that. For us it seems like a long time, but like it's not really a significant period throughout the course of like the existence of the world. Right? So then if you look at it from that thing, and even Allah Ta'ala says in so many verses in the Quran that وَمَا يُدْرِيكَ لَعَلَّ السَّاعَةَ قَرِيبٌ, that it'll like it's near, the day of judgment is near. And another explanation of that is that like sometimes time passes, and then once it passes, then we don't even know where the time went. So I can say now I'm 27. I can remember the day when I started high school. I was 14 years old. You remember like it was yesterday. I didn't even know where all those years went in between, right? So now, so based on that, if I look at my 14-year-old self and if I were to talk to that person, I would say, you know, the time that you're gonna like be 27 is very near. So if I was 14, then 13 years is not a near time. That's basically like almost the entire life that I existed, right? Now looking at it from this perspective, you say that it just happened in an instant. It's very near in that sense, right? So then if you look at it like that, you see that it's very near.
So then, so Muslims have a detailed record of the life. Not to the extent that I mean, there's narration was mentioning that second time, everybody comes to quickly, everybody quickly, because it wasn't put together.
No, so then Allah Ta'ala will
It has to be at least
yeah, there'll be some kind of
very quick.
well, we don't really know. Like, the hadith says that basically everyone will be Muslim at that time, but then a wind will come and it'll basically, like, any Muslims that are there, they'll basically put them away. The only people that will be left is Shirab and the worst people. And then, yeah, and the good people. Like, for us, it's really very small.
How was the khazan?
Assalamu alaikum, brothers. We are going to have our Tajweed workshop in about 10 minutes. If you haven't already done so, please fill out the surveys in the lobby for those in Sunnah and Nafil Itikaf. These surveys help us improve the program for next year. So any comments or concerns that you had, any problems that you saw, anything that we should improve, we welcome your feedback. It'll just help make the program better in future years.
Assalamu alaikum, brothers. Inshallah, we'll begin the Tajweed workshop. Our brothers are requested to make their way into the main hall. Jazakullahu Khairun. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسوله الأمين أما بعد. Dear brothers, sisters and listeners, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So alhamdulillah, we've been discussing a lot of major portions of Tajweed. We've talked about many rules of Tajweed, and inshallah I just want to finish up. There's a couple more slides. We're going to talk about qalqala a little bit, not too much. Not much to it, it's just the letters. And then the final part of this lecture, I wanted to finish up these slides, is on mud. Mud is how to stretch, when to stretch, what are the conditions of stretching, how long you should stretch. So that's not too heavy of a topic, but there are a couple slides on that. For those taking note, there are several terms as well. So just pay attention as much as you can, inshallah ta'ala. Oh yes, oh I'm sorry, I thought it was on. So yesterday all we were doing was we were practicing reading, trying to apply the rules that we already learned. And alhamdulillah, I think we're slowly getting the rules for heavy letters and light letters, the letters of ra and also gunna, mim sakin, nun sakin, the differences, idgham, incomplete idgham, complete idgham, in nun sakin, idhar, iqlab, and when to stretch and when not to stretch, inshallah ta'ala. So the next slide that we have over here is the slide of qalqala letters. Now, you'll remember that what the scholars of the past, the Tajweed scholars of the past, what they do is they try to make rhymes. They try to make a way to remember the letters easier. So for the heavy letters, it was khussa daghtin qidh, for us to memorize it. Over here, they made it qutubu jaddin, qutubu jaddin. So these 5 letters are known as the qalqala letters. When a letter of qalqala has a sakin, or the letter becomes sakin due to stopping on it. What does that mean? Like in Surah Al-Ikhlas, قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ. You stop over there. But originally, the word is قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ. It's ahadun. But when you stop on it, it becomes ahad. So that's a sakin due to stopping. That's a sakin due to stopping. Then an echo sound will be made. The letters of qalqala are the following: qaf, ta, ba, jim, and dal. 5 letters. What does that mean? That means it excludes all of the other letters. So when reading any of the other letters and you find yourself making an echoing sound, then that's wrong. Because there's only an echo sound on these 5 letters. Like the example in Surah Al-Fatiha. Right? Ihdinas sirata alladhina an'amta. Sometimes what happens is we say an'amta, an'amta. Now that's an echo sound of noon. Noon is not one of the 5 letters, so that's wrong. We can't say an'amata, it's an'amta, an'amta. Right? It's not alhamdu, it's alhamdu. You cannot say Allah, then they're making a double sound, an echo sound, and that's a mistake. That's a mistake. So there's only 5 letters: qaf, ta, ba, jim, and dal. We'll practice a little bit. Bismillah, bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Naqa'an, fala taqhar. So remember, we need to make the double sound. فَلَا تَقَ. See how I'm saying? I'm not saying taqa. I'm not putting a fatha on it. I'm making a slight echo sound. تَقَ. فَوَسَطْنَا أطعمهم حبل يحاسبكم ألم يجعل أجر لم يلد ولم يولد. Now oftentimes what happens is we put a lot of force saying that, okay, no, I really need to make qalqala, so then what happens, you say lam yalid, lam yalid. Lots of takalluf, there's too much force over there. It has to be very natural. Lam yalid, wa lam yulad. Wa in tubdu صدرك فانصب فارغب. Okay, we'll move on. I want to move on to the mud. Now mud is a very interesting topic. How to stretch and when to stretch, right? Those squiggly lines or the straight lines, they're not written there because, you know, the scholars of the past decided to just put that there. There's a reason why they are there, and the reason why there are two of them, because they follow two different rules. So each of them have their own. So now overall category, or the definition of mud is to lengthen. Madda yamuddu means to stretch something. So mud in tajweed language is to stretch this, lengthen the sound in the letters of mud. There are letters of mud. And the letters of leen. We'll go over leen in a little bit. Right now we'll focus on the letters of mud. There are 3 letters of mud. There are alif, and remember alif is different from hamza. Alif is just a stretching sound. Before it, if there's a fatha, you stretch it for 1 alif. That's all alif is. There's waw sakin ma qabl madmum. Waw sakin, which has a dhamma letter before it. A waw sakin, and before it there's a letter with a dhamma on it. And ya sakin ma qabl maksur. Ya sakin, which has a kasra letter before it. Ya sakin with a letter with kasra before it. Waw sakin with a letter of dhamma on it that comes before. And alif. And the alif also, usually the alif is only stretched when there's a letter with fatha before it.